Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/315, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 315th edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, it is another preview episode of my next tour. It is Southern California 2023. Remember how the missing link last year created yet another missing link? Well, here in March of 2023, we're finally going to fill that in. It's a brand new California adventure, but with a lowercase a, so I do not hear from Disney lawyers. Look it up, it's a theme park. On this edition, we're going to go through the ride, we're going to talk about the gear, we're going to talk about the weather, and the adventures that are all contained therein. There's a good SAT word for you, kids. Let's start off with the rides. And I say rides because this is not so much a linear tour as it is kind of a greatest hits of adventures in multiple chapters. And I am going to talk about these in terms of chapters. Chapter 1, I fly into Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, and I do a transit-assisted ride from LAX to Anaheim. That's going to be featuring a little bit of the Los Angeles Metro Green Line, which I've never been on, and a fun ride from the Norwalk terminus of the Green Line to Anaheim on Ball Road. I have ridden a good chunk of this in 2014 before. I was originally considering doing the entire trip, but I decided that I would like to check some boxes off of my goals and integrate in some fast forwards where appropriate. And that is part of what this tour is all about. Chapter 1 will include that. One thing that I am unsure about, and it's going to be kind of a I'll decide it when I'm there kind of a thing, there is a shuttle that can take you from LAX proper, right from the curb, to the Metro Green Line. It's not terribly far away, but I'm considering taking that. But I also kind of like riding away from airports, so it's going to depend on how I feel in the moment. So I'm either going to gear up and ride over there. And I passed by it, by the way, last year. If you recall, last year when I was riding to LAX, I passed right by this very metro stop. It's called the Aviation stop because it's on Aviation Boulevard Way something. Aviation is the name of the road, which is a great road for being near an airport. But that is where I'm going to be picking up the Green Line. That is the, let's see, I guess I would call it the western terminus because it is a west-east line. And I would be taking it all the way and then going from Norwalk to Anaheim. That will be chapter 1. So it'll be a little bit of transit and the adventures of getting from the airport to the station, packing up the bike, packing everything up and getting on the metro, and then unpacking it, getting on the roads and getting out to Anaheim. So a nice solid ride and some good metroing, some good transit aided bike touring there. That's chapter 1, LAX to Anaheim. Chapter 2. After a fun night, perhaps, out in Anaheim, I'm going to be waking up the next morning and getting up at a pretty decent hour because this is probably one of the two, well, it's actually a pretty co-equal mileage day, but it's got a lot of moving parts. And I'm doing chapter 2, Anaheim to the missing link, but it's a little bit more than that. This is a ride, first of all, from Anaheim due south to the coast, and then grabbing a coastal bus fast forward and getting to flash my Marine Base ID to allow me into the northern part of the Marine Base Pendleton to complete the missing link, ending up in Oceanside. From there, I'm going to take a quick coastal train to gorgeous, beautiful San Diego, California, where we will be finishing up chapter 2. So that's a fun trip where it's going to be multiple different types of transit involved, going through the Marine Base and ending up in San Diego, which I think is really going to be a lot of fun. That's, I think, sneakily, is that my favorite day? I don't know, because the next day is pretty good. Chapter 3, the Border Run Loop. This one's cool because it features a whole variety of things. So I'll be starting in downtown San Diego, a short bike ride, and I'll be taking the Coronado ferry to, well, Coronado. And then I'll be riding along that beautiful stretch of road. And I believe bike trail as well. I think there's a little bit of road, a little bit of bike trail. But that will end up taking me down into the southern suburbs of San Diego, and then all the way to the border and to the International Park, which was the end point for my 2014 tour. And then I'm going to turn right back around and go back to San Diego, just like I did in 2014. So this border run loop is going to be really reminiscent of past riding. However, because I'm doing the Coronado ferry part, it's going to be a different route and I think a lot more fun. I'll get a lot more of the coast, a lot more water, rather than going through some really dense urbanish areas between San Diego and there. It was fine. There are great tacos. There's a great taco shop that I think I'm going to miss out on in San Ysidro, maybe. Anyways, I'm going to, trust me, I'll find my way to find some fish tacos on this trip. Don't you worry about me. But the border run loop is going to be, I think, a little bit more fun because I'm going to be closer to the water for this entire ride. That is chapter 3. Now, interestingly, all of these chapters have been on one particular day, but the final chapter, chapter 4, the mileage run, spans multiple days. Now, is this one closer to a stunt? It totally is. Look, I'll just read what I wrote. The adventure to unlock elite status on Alaska Airlines, plus the ability to test my Brompton gate checking systems, plus Northern California? Sure. Yeah. Okay. So turns out I am only a few hundred miles away from achieving elite status on Alaska Airlines, and I needed one more segment to basically pull this off. And so what I decided to do is to, instead of staying in Southern California for my final night, I decided to take an inexpensive flight on Alaska Airlines up to San Jose, of all places. Yes, in the Bay Area. And I'm going to come back the next morning and connect with my flight in LAX and fly home from there as planned. Why am I doing this? Again, a couple of different things. One, of course, the selfish reason of wanting to get my elite status again on Alaska Airlines. It's helpful for bike touring, actually, because I get better boarding and all this other kind of stuff. It just makes life a lot easier from a bike touring perspective, but also from a business travel and a personal travel perspective. Alaska serves the Northwest, of course, and that's where I end up going a lot. So it's helpful for me. The other thing that I thought would be really helpful in podcastable about all of this is the fact that there's more airports that are involved where I'm going to be biking to and from. I'll be biking to San Diego's airport on this one. Of course, we're biking away from San Diego's airport last year. This year, we're going to be biking to San Diego airport and then brand new airport, San Jose, which actually has some excellent bike infrastructure. So I'll be staying at a hotel up there near the San Jose airport. I'll be arriving reasonably late, coming back and waking up very early because I'm on the first flight back down. And I'm going to LA rather than back to San Diego. So this is my weird way of getting from San Diego to LA like I needed to by way of San Jose. Is this a great idea? No, but I will be able to test my gate checking capability for the Brompton because these are going to be regional jets that I'll be on, and I cannot fit the Brompton in the overheads of those. And so this will be an opportunity to test twice using my Dimpa bag and gate checking this wonderful little bike that gets me to wonderful places. This is the one thing that I'm always a little bit more nervous about. And so I thought, all right, let's do this where it's part of the plan so that I can learn from this. I'll be able to do it twice because I'm going up to San Jose and then back on similar size jets. The bike is going to be out of my hands. I'm going to have to do the prep work to protect it properly. I'll have to be hauling all of that with me during this. So I think this is a good test of finding ways to make sure that I don't just have the Dimpa bag as a backup, but I've got it there as a plan for gate checking this bike. So chapter 4 is full of weirdness, but I think also very helpful testing and experimentation for you, the podcast listener. So 4 chapters in this particular ride: LAX to Anaheim, including the missing link, the border run loop, and then the mileage run. So those are your 4 parts, your 4 weeks of podcasting goodness. The gear. Well, the Brompton, obviously. The Brompton is going to be making its appearance again. You may recall from a few weeks ago when I talked about the setup that I wasn't really feeling great about my bicycle touring setup with the Brompton. So I've been fiddling around with it a little bit. And as I mentioned before, it still is a pretty good system. I did explore, as I mentioned, looking at other ways to include the second Ortlieb as part of the system. And I've decided that while there are ways to do it, I don't think I'm interested in doing them now. So I'm back to my regular old plan of the larger drysack, the one I should have brought with me to Florida. And that's going to go on the back. It gives me the extra capacity that I need. And of course, the Ortlieb back roller on the front luggage block setup. It's tried and true. It's good weight distribution. I like it a lot. It served me well. Am I fully satisfied with it? No. Am I going to tinker with it more? Yes. Is it going to be happening on this trip? No. So one thing that I will say about from a gear perspective, though, I need to be prepared for chillier temperatures than I had in Florida. And I have to confess that was a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought it would be a touch warmer in Southern California by this point. But you have to remember that I did this ride last year a full month later. And so doing it in March means it's a little bit chillier, especially in the mornings. We've got highs in the mid-60s throughout most of Southern California and lows as low as the mid to lower 40s. And that's just what we've got from a long-term, for entertainment purposes only projection in the forecast right now. It looks like, I would say normally rain is unlikely during this time of year, but I do plan to have my rain jacket, if only to have as my warm outer layer for when I first start off in the mornings, but it's there if I need it. I'm trying really hard to reduce the amount of clothes that I'm going to be bringing to the absolute bare minimum. If you recall from the last tour that we just wrapped up, I had to pack more civilian clothes because I was kind of out and about in a non-bike touring capacity for a couple of days afterwards. This trip, I don't have that so much, but I did learn a little bit about what I care to wear after bike tours, so I'm going to be focused on that. I'm also, as we talked about from the takeaways episode for the Florida trip, I am revisiting my tool bag. I'm going to give that a real look way ahead of time, making sure that I'm bringing that damn $1 crescent wrench with me. I brought too many of the wrong things with me to Florida. I'm going to reduce the things that are more for a ride on the Safari, my larger touring bike. Just bring the stuff that's necessary for this particular ride. That's probably going to mean patch kits, a spare tube. I've got the internally stored toolkit for the Brompton. That's most of the stuff that I would need on the bike. And then, yes, the $1 crescent wrench to make sure in case I do need to tighten up the nuts on the seat post mechanism there. Okay, so that's it for the gear. The weather. I mentioned it a little bit before, but I would say that this is just glorious to me. I mean, highs in the mid 60s, lows in the 40s. This is absolutely perfect for me, particularly since this is a non-camping trip. It's once again going to be a credit card trip. It's going to be all hotels. I would have no problems camping in the mid 40s at all. I would love that. It just doesn't really work in Southern California. Most of the camping scenarios, there's really only one decent one that's available that I can really tell, unless we're talking about urban stealth camping, and this is the wrong channel for that. I would invite you to go find some other channels for your urban stealth camping stuff. Maybe someday, but not interested at all. One thing that I'll mention is, and I think this also gets to the takeaways episode from a few weeks ago of the Florida trip, I think that I'm going to be focusing on wearing clothes as coverage rather than wearing sunscreen. So I think that I'm leaning towards cycling in long pants rather than wearing shorts, but I will bring a pair of shorts just to be on the safe side in case things turn around, or if I find after that first day that I'm just more comfortable cycling in shorts and maybe being a little colder in the morning. So we'll figure that all out when we're down there. So I will have options, but again, I'm not going to bring so much stuff with me because, as we talked about before, storage space is at a premium when you're touring on a Brompton. It's not like you've got 2 or even 4 panniers and a dry bag. I'm really limited in what I can bring, so I got to work with what capacity I've got. So an extra pair of shorts probably won't matter too much. The adventures. Well, to a certain extent, I've already talked about them just by going through the 4 chapters of this. But I really think there's going to be a lot of fun, not only on the bike, just because of the route, but off the bike as well. Staying in Anaheim means I'm staying near Disneyland. Once again, this is where you all know that I'm a bit of a Disney head. Now, I won't be going to the park this time, but I am planning on grabbing a drink with a work friend after my first day of riding. So that'll be kind of fun. There's a tiki bar at the Disneyland Hotel called Trader Sam's. It's a fun, weird, quirky place, and they make good drinks, and I figure I'll have a drink there or something along those lines. So that's always fun to me. There's also downtown Disney where they got their little Star Wars shops there. There's actually 2 of them, I think. So yeah, I'd like to go check out the merch there, and who knows, maybe I'll grab some fun Star Wars stuff. You know how I roll. I've got some really fun transit fast forwards that are part of this trip. I talked about the Metro Green Line, but there's really much more than that. We've got all sorts of stuff that's going to be involved with that. Planes, of course. We got trains. I'm going to be taking at least one train, and of course the Metro Green Line, so a subway as well, and automobiles. I'll be on a bus for sure, and a ferry. So we've got all sorts of different types of fun fast forwards that are involved with this trip. And I really like that. I think it maximizes the functionality of the Brompton. I think it makes for a more fun tour. I'm cycling in the parts that I want to cycle. I'm skipping some of the parts that I don't want to cycle in, or are just maybe not as interesting to me. So really taking advantage of that. That is, as I said, it's checking a box on some of the 2023 goals that I said as well about transit-aided touring. And I think there's going to be more to come on that, by the way, down the line. I'm also going to be checking the box finally on the missing link and kind of being able to bid adieu to that as a goal. But I also I'm super excited to be reusing my Camp Pendleton base pass, which I had to get last year. Remember, we were doing that northbound because you have to get it from the southern gate. Well, now I'll be able to ride through that northern gate and do this properly southbound. And that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited about that. If I've got time, there's an outside chance that I may try to renew that pass. They do last, I believe, just 1 year. So I don't know. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I won't. But at the very least, I will have used this particular pass twice. And that means that I believe I've burnt it quite well. I've used it quite well, I think. Last but not least, I think that the border loop is going to be a ton of it's somewhat of a recreation of what I did back. What is that? 9 years ago. 9 years ago was the Pacific Coast tour. So it'll be fun to revisit that, but it is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be taking that Coronado route instead of going through San Ysidro and all those other towns as well. So different vibe, but I think just as much fun. And I think it's going to be beautiful to be able to ride right on the water for such a big chunk of it. And, frankly, to get back to that point where I took the picture 9 years ago of me right there by the big old border wall and all the things that have happened in our world. But since then, thinking about, COVID and all that other kind of stuff, I just think it'll be fun to kind of revisit that. Just given the context of the last 9 years of my life. And that's also 9 years of this podcast too, because the podcast started that same year. So kind of fun, kind of cool. I'm not a huge nostalgia guy, except when I am. And so I think we'll have some time for that too. So much fun for this trip. Really excited to be able to bring you along for the ride. Tour journals are going to begin next week for chapter 1 of this tour. We will, as I mentioned, we'll have 4 distinct chapters. We'll have a takeaways. And folks, I'm here to tell you, I told you a few weeks ago that I've got another tour kind of in development, as it were. I think it's looking pretty good for the spring tour, and I think we may be rolling right into that as the next tour after that. So if you're digging the tour journals, we got more of those to come, but I'm also hoping to be able to get some interviews and some other good content as well. So excited to bring you along for the ride. As always, tune in starting next week for Tour Journals Southern California 2023. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedal Shift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedal Shift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Bettinati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joaquin Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latoile Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Kropke, Todd Grossbeck, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Lico, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCullough, John Hickman, Carl Presseau, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Michael Izuski, Hank O'Donnell, David Zanoni, David Weil, Matthew Sponsummer, Chad Reno, Spartan Dale, Carolyn Ferguson, Peggy Littlefield, Lauren Allensmith, Eric Burns, Thomas Pearl, Darren McKibben, Richard Stewart, Dave Fletcher, Jack Smith, Luke Parkinson, Ryan Patterson, Sarus Faravar, John Gardner, and Sam Scruggs. And thanks also to all past and anonymous folks for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.